Hi, I want to introduce you to Medusa. This is Bobby from Bobby's Baking Blog. And if you don't know who Medusa is, she's Greek mythology. And she had snakes that came out of her head and she turned men into stone. You don't want a Greek mythology lesson, so I'll just go into explaining why I made her. She is what I've made for my Halloween blog. She's made out of a candy corn cookie cutter, a large one. Her face is done in a fondant. And then I went ahead and painted on the eyes, the nose, the lips, and did some shadowing. The hair is also done in a 50-50 of fondant and gum paste, as well as the snakes. And it's my pleasure to teach you how I made her. Alright, so as you can see, it's just a candy corn. Excuse my pink hands. I've tried everything to wash it off. One thing about painting, it gets everywhere and it doesn't come off. Anyway, so this is already covered in fondant. I have made a template and transferred it over to my fondant. Her hair will come up here, so I'm not really worried about this. I went ahead and painted in her mouth with a claret mixed with a very little bit of white, which is a sugar flare color. I dotted the nose in with just a regular Copy Kate black food safe marker. And I'm going to go and draw the eyes in, or paint the eyes in, excuse me. So I'm doing that with Wilton's black. And I have all my paints already ready and done. So I'm just going to load up my brush. And when I say that I used a claret with a little bit of white, I kind of used the same method for the one stroke, in that I put white on one side of my liner brush and the claret on the other, and made sure the claret side was up, so that's why it gave me the shadow it did. This is just pure black. I'm putting my pinky against my cookie, not on the fondant, which has been sitting overnight to not get hard but develop a crust so it won't dent, but I don't want to smush it with my fingers. So my pinky is right here holding it. I'm taking my liner, which is, I believe, a 3-0, and I'm just going to draw or paint in the eyes. Once you get everything painted on, it's important that you wait just a little bit before you go and fill in the color so that you don't bleed. I would say maybe about 20 minutes or so. You can check what you first started with. So I first started with her lips. So when I get done with the eyes and the eyebrows, I'll go back and check if those lips are dry enough. I can go and fill that in with another mixture, a lighter mixture of the claret mixed with white, and then I will go in and add in the shades of darkness, because lips aren't just one color. For the eyes, for the white of the eyes, I use a mixture of airbrush white and food paste white, so that I can get that transparent white look that you get when you look into somebody's eyes. They're not stark white like Charlie Brown. We want her to have a beautiful face and her hair and snakes to scare everybody. We don't want her face to scare everybody. If you think that you've made a mistake or you've gone off, kind of like I did right now, you can go in with a brush and a little bit of water or alcohol and just kind of smooth it out. More than likely, because of the way that this is designed, her hair will cover most of that, but I'll show you. You can clean up a little bit right in here, like so. It's a little bit time consuming. And at first you'll be wondering why the black is smearing everywhere, but eventually it will come clean. Okay. And since I'm going to be shading her face, I'm not as concerned. The other thing you could do is go in with a little bit of just Crisco shortening. That will also take it off. And I'm going to show you the brow while I wait for that eye to dry before going on to the other eye. So for the brow, I'm going to go in with a little bit bigger. And I'm going to put my brush in the water. You should keep your brushes in the water when you're not using them. I'm going with a number 2. And the color I'm using is brown. Normally when I'm painting, since all the colors are dark, I will label them. I honestly have to tell you I forgot. So I'm making sure before I go onto my face to test it on my piece of glass. The last thing I want is to have a purple eyebrow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rest my pinky back over here, hold that cookie tight, and go in and bring up her eyebrow. And then later on I can go in and add the little hairs. Right now I just want that line. I could probably be safe to put in, I'm going to make her iris a purple color, and I'm using Wilton's Violet for that. It's a nice deep violet. Right now I'm going to be mostly violet with maybe a tinge of white just to get the color to look a true violet. And then later on, of course, I'll add more white so that it does not look too overdone. Now I don't want to fill that in just yet because I know the black is really, really wet. So I'm going to go over and do the other eye. Alright, I've gotten everything drawn in, or painted in. I keep saying drawn. I've gotten everything painted on. I'm going to start filling things in. So I'm mixing up my lip color with more white than I did the outline with. And since I've already done a cookie, I know these colors are going to work fine. I am going to go a lot lighter than my outline so that I can go back and add some shadows. So I'm just kind of following where my lips, where the painted line of my lips are. I'm using a very small number 2 filbert. Her lips are such a heart shape, it probably could have also gone in with a number 2 rosebud. But I grabbed the filbert and that seems to be working fine. But that would also, if you have a rosebud, that would work perfectly too. And if you don't know what a rosebud brush is, it's similar to a cat's tongue. And the only way I can describe it is that it's wide at the bottom and it comes to a very point at the top. I'm not too concerned that I might have to go back and fill in that dark middle line of her lips. I am going to try and stay above that line, but if you go over it, don't sweat it. You'll still be able to see through the color and go right back into it. to drop back in. At this point, I haven't added any alcohol at all to my paint. I don't need to. It's pretty fresh. It's doing well. My brushes, I've started off with them dry. I will be taking out the ones that are in the water, and like I've said before, I'm going to make sure they're as dry as I can possibly get them before I fill in. So now I'm going to go in and do the eye. I got her lip pretty much done, and I'm happy with it. It's a little bit lighter on the bottom than it is on the top, but by the time I add in the shadows, we'll be fine. And nobody's human lips are perfect. Not even Medusa's. Okay, so we're going to go back with the violet, and this time I'm going to add quite a bit of white, get a much lighter color. Eyes have a transparent look. I do have to be careful, and I'm going to warn you, if you're working with the Wilton violet, it tends to go blue on you if you add too much white. So add as much white as you can and still keep it a violet color, unless you're trying to go for a blue eye. Now once you get the eye filled in, of course you'll need a pupil, and we're going to add a little speck of white to give a hint of a gleam in that eye and some shadowing to the iris. You will have to wait though, because as you fill in, it can start to smear, especially if you're going to go back with a dark color like black. If you're going to go in with a lighter color, you're alright, but going in with the darker color, I have found waiting just a little bit of time, not too much, but a little bit longer than you did when you drew it in or painted it in, will help keep you from smearing that black. Now I'm going a tad lighter on the bottom of the iris here than I did on the top, and I'm doing that to add a little bit of shadowing so I don't have to go back with too much white later on. It's just a time saver for me. And I'm going to go to the other eye. The other thing that I want to make sure that I say, when you're mixing up the eye color for your iris of the eye, mix up enough for both eyes, because it will be almost impossible, and the dark and the light. So where I have the dark a little bit at the top here, have that mixed up, and have your light mixed up. Because trying to get the exact same formula and mixing colors will be almost impossible. And the last thing you want, unless you're deliberately trying, I'm going to turn her so I can get into the corner. The last thing you're going to want is to have two different color eyes, unless that's what you want your Halloween person to have, or your Medusa. I picked Medusa, as I said, I racked my brain. I wanted to do something I hadn't really seen done, because snakes can be kind of scary. I'm not that afraid of snakes. In fact, there's a picture of me at a birthday at one of those reptile parties where I have a boa constrictor all wrapped around me. I know my husband's terrified of them. But a lot of people are afraid of snakes, and she can be a little terrifying, Medusa. Nobody wants to be turned to stone. So now we're going to add in the eyelashes. And what I do for the eyelashes is I try to find the smallest brush I can without doing a spotter. And do I have my number? Yes, I do. Which would be, for me, it's a number 30, which would be a 000, depending on what brush company you're working with. And then I will, at that time, take alcohol to what I'm working on. This time I happen to be working on my artist glass. I'm going to roll my liner in there until it's not coming out like water, and it's not completely dry, so that those eyelashes just flow. And because black isn't really black for some reason, I want to make it as thin as possible. And I'm doing this because I just want a wispy look to the eyelashes. I don't want it to look really harsh. I just want a little bit of eyelash going on. Her hair is going to be covering up most of what's going on over here. And that's the same technique I'm going to use for the brows. And I'm not even going to do the bottom of her eyelashes. So we're going to wait for our filler to dry and go back and fill in. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've put the white of the eye on. I've added eyelashes to the other side. I added the pupil to this eye. I'm going to add it to this eye and show you how to do that. I want to just go back to the whites of the eyes and explain. For this, I used an airbrush color. It's the only time I used an airbrush color. I used a 3-part to 1-part airbrush white to food paste white, because the whites of your eyes would be too starky white if I didn't. And I'm turning her upside down because for me it's easier for me to paint that iris in on the other side. My left side, or the left side of anything I paint, is always a little bit more difficult than the right side. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lightly kind of brush in where I want that pupil to be with my black. And bring it in to the eye. And Medusa's looking up in this particular cookie. I think she was looking up in the other cookie too. And for me, I just like that. I did not want the pupil to be in the middle of the eye. I definitely didn't want her looking down. Besides, if she was looking right at you, I couldn't show her to you because she'd turn you to stone. So we're going to add in the pupil. And it's just, you're just layering over the iris. And at this point, you really want to make sure to load your brush up. So you want it about 3/4 of the way loaded. And I realize that that's a little bit hard to tell on a black bristle brush to see any colored paint, especially black. And when I say paint, I am always talking about food paste, food coloring. The other thing, I told you the brands that I use. You will not have good luck if you use a very liquid. Oh, that's not. I did take English class. Let me start again. You will not be happy if you use like a food liquid, food color that you would do Easter eggs with. It's going to run. It's not going to really lay where you want it to. You can use petal dust. I think I've mentioned that before. It just gets a little bit costly. Okay. That one doesn't quite match. So we're going to bring in a little bit more. My black's getting just a tad dried out. So since my brush is nice and clean, I'm just going to go ahead and dip it into the black. And I know some people just go straight into their colors and will dip their brush into their colors directly. I normally don't do that, but it's kind of sloppy to see me putting all the colors down, and we've already shown you how to mix them before, so kind of cheating for me anyway. Alright, so we have her pupil in place, and I noticed that it's not as round as the other one, but I also have a wet spot still going on the purple, so I can go back and fix that. I'm not too concerned. You can always go back and layer. I'm going to show you one quick thing with the lips, and then we're going to add in the shadowing so that it looks like she has a nose, not two little dots. So I'm going to go in with a darker claret and just add in a little shadowing through her lips. Just a couple little, I'm going to shade that in. I don't think anybody's lips, unless you're wearing lipstick, is one true color. And even with lipstick, it's not always one true color. So we're just going to add just a little bit of shadowing in. Give her lips some dimension. I lucked out. I did not have to go back and do the line in the center. It seems to have stayed. So now we're going to shadow in Medusa's nose. And I'm going to explain this the best way that I know how. I'm going to grab my petal dust. I'm using it dry. This is Dove Green. And I need a little cornstarch, so I'm going to grab the cornstarch. And I don't normally mix my food paste with cornstarch, but for this I am, because I want to start as slow as possible. And when I say slow, I should say light. I want my, because I don't want it to look like she has a smudged, dirty face, but I do want enough shadowing in there. In fact, I'm going to go with this little brush. So I'm using a square number 8. I'm using a royal brush. I like those. And I'm going to start very, very light. And then I'm going to get darker as I go. That way, if I don't like something, I can go back over it with the cornstarch and get rid of it, which is a neat little trick. So I'm going to start under her brow and come around this eye and go around over here a little bit. And that's why I said when that black got a little bit smeared, that it wasn't that big of a deal. Besides the hair, we have the shadowing. I'm going to bring it down, brush it in. You can always go darker, which I generally end up having to do almost every single time. I'm making the bump for her nose. I have noticed that I got a little dust in her nose. This is, I think it belongs to a camera. It had a brush on it. And I'm just going to go ahead and dust it away with this air. You could use canned air, but then you run the risk of your petal dust getting everywhere, and you don't want that. It takes a little bit longer because that little puffer thing isn't very strong. But it's a great way to get rid of dust where you don't want it. So we're just shadowing in that nose. And we're really only going to shadow the nose in on one side. I am going to bring this in over here. Anywhere I want Medusa's features to stand out. And she has some pretty standoutish features. For the most part, it is probably moot for me to be doing it over here because her hair is going to cover this. But in case it comes up or the snakes lift it, I have a little bit of shadowing in there. So I'm going to step back and look, pick her up, make sure she doesn't look dirty, make sure I've got a nice little hump going on that nose, and I do. And there. That's all there is to it. Now, for her hairline, if her hairline was going to be coming down here, I would darken up here. But her hairline is actually going to start very, very low. So that's shadowing Medusa. We have our Medusa face, and I've added a little bit of edible glue. I'll probably add a little bit more because I think it dried out. All I did for the hair was I cut out just a hair cap that would fit her face from my original template, and it looks like this. And I used my plastic knife to cut it out. I'm going to, the thing about this, and I will put something under the hair once I get all the hair pieces on, because it's going to lay funny. We want it to sit up. But right now it's going to hang because this is a cookie, and there's no place for it to go at the moment. And this is it's a clay tool. It's just a rubber tip clay tool. You can find them pretty much anywhere. We have them at the shop, as well as all the brushes that I have shown you. And I'm just making sure that I get some of these rough pieces a little bit smoother. And if I see some that I don't like at all, I can just go back in with this little knife. I cannot do it with the top pieces when I go in, because then I'll be, of course, cutting the bottom pieces. But I'm going to kind of shape that in, make sure that's where I want it to be. And since Medusa has snakes coming out of her, I found out the hard way it's a little bit easier to kind of lift up her hair just a smidge so that you can fit those snakes underneath so that they're coming straight out from her hair. It also adds a little bit of dimension. Okay, so now we've got our hair cap on, and we're going to add the pieces to the hair cap. So the first thing we're going to add, and I just have them in a flap, keeping them moist, because as you know, gum paste and fondant, well, the fonderific fondant doesn't really dry out, but the gum paste will. And since it's a 50-50, I have my pieces in here. So I'm going to take my pieces out, make sure they line up. Because we want the hair to look three-dimensional, and we're going to paint this hair and add highlights and lowlights, kind of like if you were going to the salon yourself. And I'll add in, as you can see, I'll score some hair marks just so that when I'm at, that's, you don't have to do that. I like to do it because when I go to add in my coloring, it's much easier for me to know, hey, this is where I want a little bit of light color, this is where I want some dark color. It's like a real hair, a head of hair type of thing. If you're a hairdresser, even better, you can totally figure it out. So you can use water or edible glue. I like to use a little edible glue. It'll stay on, for me, I think it stays on a little bit more securely. At this point, I would not say to use an egg white, just because of the shellacking of the egg white and the fact if you get it anywhere on there, you won't really be able to use anything over it. Your paint will have a different color. It isn't as bad as with dust, but it just doesn't come out quite as nice. So all I'm doing is kind of seeing how I want this to be. So I don't have any, oh, I don't have any glue on there. So I'll add some glue to this side. Not too much. We're not trying to make a goo out of it. We just want the two pieces to line up really nice and to lay well. And then I have maybe 2 or 3, depending on what how much you want, dimension you want to add, pieces of the hair that I will add in different spots. And since Medusa's hair is long and the cookie is not, I kind of have to play around and give the illusion that the hair is a little bit longer than it really is. So I'm just going to kind of see where this might fit in and look like it belongs there. I like that. I don't normally glue these pieces down until I get them in. I don't think I need that third piece. I might bring it in later, but I actually don't think I need it. And then you just want to take these rough edges and just shape your hair so that you don't have these rough edges. And if they're too rough, if you find that it's not coming out fast enough for you with the rubber clay tool, and generally it really will, but if it's not, you can always grab your Crisco and soften it up that way. But try not to add any shine to that hair, because then you have to wait a little bit before you can paint it. Okay, so Medusa's hair is settling before I can paint it, so I thought I would share with you how I did the snakes. I started with just a piece of, I don't know, gray gum paste. I just mashed a bunch of colors together because I'm going to paint in black, so it doesn't matter. And to get them all, I wanted them all to pretty much be the same size. My snakes, I wanted them to be the same width, I should say, not so much length, but the same width. I didn't want, fat snake, skinny snake. And because it is a sugar cookie, I didn't want a gigantically like fat snake like that. So I'm going to use my clay gun. And this is a Merkin clay gun. I like this one because it's easy to use, but any clay gun that you have is fine. I'll put him to the side right now. I'm just using the standard round disc. You put them in the cap. Put your clay gun together. I've already Criscoed him up, so he should come out with ease. However, with these snakes, it's not that big a deal if he comes out a little dry because we want the snake to have scales. They're not smooth and, you know, beautiful looking logs. They're snakes. We want them to look like snakes. So we're going to bring him out. And for whatever reason, my clay gun sounds like a little mouse. I think it's injured. Okay, so here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to taper this end. That's my back end. I'm going to make sure it's nice and tapered. And I'm going to take my top end, and I'm going to worry about, I'll kind of coil him now, but I can worry about positioning it later. And I'm going to take the neck, pinch right here, come in, pinch, and the way that I got it to look like a cobra was I took both sides with my fingers and it made kind of this little divot here, and I had a cobra. And then I'm going to coil him around, and remember that you have two sides to Medusa, so whichever way, if you want an odd number of snakes, so if you're going to have 3 snakes or 5 snakes, you want to make sure that your coils go in 2 directions so they can go under the hair. You don't want to find that you have all your snakes coiled the same way and can't go under your hair. And he'll probably stand there for a second for the camera, but I can always use a little jar to keep him up until he dries, and then I can paint him. But pretty much that's what he's going to look like. You're going to paint him. You can add some diamond shaped eyes, and you can take a very fine 33 gauged wire, a little bit of floristry tape, maybe I would say a 1/4 width actually, and wrap it around your wire with like a flag type thing sticking out. Snip it so that you have a serpent's tongue. I think that would be really cool. So here's our finished Medusa, and my husband did add in an extra snake, but didn't glue him down. Must have found him sitting there for another one of my Medusa cookies. Since he's there, and he wants him there, I'm going to go ahead and glue him down. And the snakes can go in any direction that you want. You just want to make sure they're kind of set. The other thing, if I mentioned this already, I'm going to say it one more time because it's that important. You do not want to paint the snakes until they're pretty much dry, because the paint is going to soften up your fondant gum paste mixture, and you will find that your snakes get kind of floppy. So you want them to stand up like this one's almost dry actually. Depending on how much gum paste you put in there will take how long that he takes to dry. I would say you might want to do your snakes a day ahead of time, and when you fondant your cookies, because you're going to want to fondant your cookies the night ahead of time. So you can make your snakes and cover your cookies on the same day. I hope you have a lot of fun. I hope you have a very spooky, scary Halloween, and that you enjoy making Medusa cookies. It was my pleasure to teach you.